I'm Michele Hogan. I'm the Executive Director of AAI, and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Derry Roopenian, who also happens to be our Distinguished Award recipient for 2013, Distinguished Service Award recipient at 2013. But the unique thing about Derry and me is that we were students together in graduate school. So I know a lot of things about Derry. Perhaps Derry was like the least likely to succeed. If you could see him in the office when he'd come in and he spent all his time eating. And but why don't you tell them what you do now, Derry?
Well, what do I do?
Well, what's your title? We'll start there.
So I am a professor at the Jackson Laboratory, which is an organization in Maine, in a very beautiful area. I do work bridging between genetics and immunology, and we use mice because it's uniquely applicable and to the resources of the organization to try to learn how the genetics influence mostly autoimmune responses, and my particular interests are in lupus at this point of time. We use them to learn about the processes that start a disease rather than once the disease happens. So a lot of my drive right now is to understand the signals and the molecules that start things off. And this is something that's very difficult to do in humans, of course, because humans, when they show up, when you study them, is once they've entered the clinic. And a major focus of where I want to go is really trying to understand the processes that happen before that, with the idea that you can actually come up with treatments and ways to prevent autoimmune diseases from occurring. So heading off the disease before the patient actually arrives at the clinic by developing treatments that would counteract and ablate the disease processes before they become too serious to treat. So that's one of my favorite areas right now.
So, beautifully spoken, well said.
Why, thank you.
So, when I met Derry, he had been rescued by a beautiful woman, his wife Sherry, and was happily married. But prior to that, the story was he spent a lot of time actually sleeping in the lab. Like you had to live in Bob
Oh yeah,
Clark's
when
lab?
I moved to Minnesota, I didn't have a place to live, and there was an extra laboratory. So yeah, it was, economically it made a lot of sense. I didn't. There was a mattress in there. I brought a mattress with me in my $50 car that I picked up, and so I slept in there. It was great, Get up, take a shower, no commuting.
So the thing about Derry, though, even though he sort of had this haphazard movement towards the end of his career, or the conclusion of his graduate career, he had a plan. He had this plan, and even back 25 years ago, he had a plan. And by God, you've done that plan.
Actually, it was, more than 30 years ago.
His plan
That's
was...
aging you.
Yeah, he's way older than I am. So his plan was he was going to graduate, he was going to go back to Harvard, do a postdoc, and you were going to...
And then go to Jackson Laboratory.
Labs. So how did that happen? How did you make... were you lucky? Were you what would you tell someone that said, I have a plan? What would you tell a young person?
Well, the thing is, none of it... There was no... It wasn't as if once I developed the plan, I developed the goal, and then it worked. It wasn't a carefully considered plan. It was just that this is what I'm going to do, and nothing's going to stop me. And it's just, the ducks all everything fell into place.
So you believed in it. You persevered.
So I went there, and when I was a postdoc at Harvard, after a year and a half, there was a position opened, and I just said, I'm not finished with my postdoc, but I think I'll apply to Jackson Lab. Got offered a job. My mentor at Harvard was not particularly pleased. And then I went there, and probably, I think it's unusual that, it was like coming into exactly the environment where you feel right. And so I haven't left.
Well, he's the
since I
only
arrived.
person I know who said 25, 30 years ago, I'm going to do this, and it's exactly step by step.
And that may be the only thing that I've actually said that actually has worked out that precisely.
So of all the people along the way, who was the person you think was most influential on your career?
That's an interesting question. There was no one. Well, yeah. Actually, my high school chemistry professor was most influential because he was the first person that both demanded a lot of me and praised me. After that, it was after that it was more. There've been a number of people who have impacted. Bob Click.
Yeah.
Who was the first person who got me into immunology research. The person that I worked for before that, Vladimir P. Skipsky, who told me what I don't want to do, or made me figure out what I don't want to do. Fritz Bach had a strong impact, and a few people after that, who I found particularly insightful. First director at the Jackson Laboratory when I arrived, Ken Pagan, had a big influence. But it was more, with Fritz and Bob Click, it was more, you learn from them in terms of their strengths, but you try to tap and understand those, but you don't try to emulate their weaknesses at the same time. But that's all people like that, they have their strengths and the weaknesses. So you tap from people, what are the lessons you learn from people in both ways. Yeah.
So if you were going to go back to our younger selves, what would be the thing you'd tell yourself? Like, what's a piece of advice you'd give yourself? Maybe that you'd wish someone had given you, or something you struggled with that you needed.
Yeah, what I would have. That's my English teachers would have come down really hard on me.
You wish they would have.
In terms of writing, I wish
You
they
wish they
would
would
have.
have.
In terms of writing, that was always my biggest and continues to be my biggest challenge. It's easy to come up with great ideas, but to actually put them in a format that other people can understand.
So where was your favorite time?
Well, there's no right now. Everything's been better. Every time in my life has gotten better, and I would never go back and say that I'd rather be back at that time, ever. At least up until now. So I like it the way things are.
And the only last thing I would say, that it's very important to have a sense of humor.
Yeah, well, that.
So you've done well.
Yeah, I don't take myself seriously, and if necessary, I don't take other people seriously too. So.
And I'm glad we're still friends.
Mm-hmm.